The night was quiet, but inside the small house the sound of hungry stomachs filled the air. 5 alien children sat together on the floor, their eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. They had eaten everything they could find during the day, yet the emptiness inside them grew stronger. Their stepfather had left that morning, muttering about how they ate too much, how they were nothing but a burden. They thought he would return with food, but as the hours passed, the silence outside grew heavier. The children began to realize that he was not coming back, at least not tonight. The oldest child, Rin, tried to stay strong. He looked at his younger brothers and sisters and whispered, "Don't worry. Maybe he will come tomorrow." But even he did not believe his own words. His face was thin, his arms weak, yet he forced himself to stand tall. The younger ones looked up to him, and he could not show fear. Still, in his heart, fear was growing like a storm. The second child, Lyra, tried to laugh, tried to pretend it was a game. She said, "Maybe we can find something hidden. Maybe a secret snack." She searched the shelves, the cupboards, even the small cracks in the wall, but she found nothing, only dust and the faint smell of food long gone. Her laughter faded, replaced by quiet tears. No one said anything, because they all felt the same pain. The youngest, a little boy named Taro, began to cry softly. His tiny hands clutched his stomach as he whispered, "It hurts." Rin carried him to the corner and tried to comfort him. He told him stories about bright stars, about great heroes, about fathers who never left their children. But even as he spoke, his voice trembled, because their father was gone and their stepfather had walked away. Outside, the night was alive with strange sounds. The forest surrounding their home whispered with movements, rustling leaves and distant cries. The children had been told never to go out at night. The shadows were dangerous, the stepfather had warned them. Now the house felt like a prison, a box with no escape, and hunger made the walls seem smaller and darker. Hours passed slowly. The children tried to sleep, but their stomachs would not let them rest. Rin sat by the window, staring at the pale moonlight. He imagined food, sweet fruit, warm bread, roasted meat. The images filled his mind. But when he opened his eyes, there was only emptiness. He wondered if they would survive another day. Suddenly, Lyra whispered, "Do you think he left us forever?" The words hung in the air like a curse. No one wanted to answer, but the silence was louder than any reply. Taro cried again, and the others held him close. The truth was clear. They had been abandoned, and the world outside was too big, too cruel for them to face alone. But then something strange happened. A low hum filled the air, so soft it was almost like a song. The children lifted their heads, listening, their fear mixing with curiosity. Outside the window, a faint light flickered between the trees. It was not the pale glow of the moon, nor the red eyes of forest beasts. It was something else, something unknown. Rin's heart pounded. He wanted to protect his siblings, but he also wanted to see. The hum grew louder, steady, mechanical, unlike anything they had ever heard. The children huddled together, their hunger forgotten for a moment, replaced by fear and wonder. The light moved closer, brighter, until it shone against the walls of their home. Shadows stretched long across the floor, wrapping the children in darkness and silver glow. "Is it him?" Lyra whispered, her voice shaking. "Maybe he came back." But Rin shook his head. Their stepfather had no machine, no light like this. This was something different, something far more powerful. He placed a finger to his lips, telling the others to stay silent. The hum slowed, then stopped. The forest fell quiet as if it was holding its breath. The children pressed their ears against the wall, waiting for any sound. At first there was nothing, only silence. Then came the crunch of footsteps on dead leaves, slow and heavy. Someone, or something, was walking toward their door. Fear froze them in place. Even Rin could not move, his heart beating so loud he thought the stranger would hear it. The doorknob rattled just once, then stopped. No one breathed. Outside, the footsteps halted, and then, as if the night itself was testing them, the sound of knocking echoed through. The house knock, knock, knock. The children's eyes widened in terror. Who could it be? Their stepfather? A stranger? A beast clever enough to mimic human sound? No one dared to answer. Rin stood frozen, torn between opening the door and keeping it locked. But deep inside, he knew that whatever waited outside was not going to leave. The hunger was still inside them, burning and painful, but now another feeling had joined it: suspense. The night had changed, their lives had changed, and from this moment, nothing would ever be the same again. The knocking did not stop. It came again and again, slow and heavy, echoing through the thin walls of the house. The children sat frozen, their eyes wide, their bodies trembling. Rin pressed his back against the door, holding his breath, as if his small frame could protect his siblings from whatever waited outside. The night was silent except for that sound. Knock after knock, each one louder, each one closer to breaking their courage. Then, as suddenly as it had started, the knocking ended. The forest outside grew quiet again, the strange hum gone, leaving only the cries of distant creatures. The children waited, hearts pounding, until even their fear began to feel like silence. Lyra whispered, "It's gone," but no one believed her. Something about the air felt heavy, like eyes were still watching, like the night itself was listening to them breathe. Minutes crawled into hours. The children sat together in the corner, afraid to move, afraid to sleep. The youngest, Taro, clung to Rin's arm, his tears drying on his cheeks. The food was gone, the fire was out, and their stepfather had not returned. The children were alone, truly alone. And deep inside, they began to understand that no one was coming back for them. Rin tried to stay strong. He told the others, maybe tomorrow he will return, maybe he will bring food. But the words felt empty in his mouth. He remembered the look in the stepfather's eyes before he left, cold, tired, filled with anger. It was not the look of someone who would return. It was the look of someone who had already abandoned them in his heart. The night stretched on, endless and cruel. When the first pale light of morning entered through the window, the children felt no relief. Instead, hunger clawed at their stomachs. Like a beast with sharp teeth, Lyra tried to distract them, searching every corner of the house again, but she found nothing. No bread, no fruit, not even a crumb. The cupboards echoed with emptiness, mocking their pain. Outside, the forest called. To them, there might be berries, roots, or even small creatures to catch. But the stepfather had always warned them, the forest will eat you alive. He spoke of shadows that hunted the weak, of beasts that smelled fear. The children remembered his words, and fear kept them inside. Yet hunger pushed against their fear, stronger with each passing hour. By midday, Rin made a decision. He whispered, "I will go outside. I will look for food." The younger ones gasped, shaking their heads, begging him not to. But he could not watch them suffer any longer. He stepped. Out the door, the others clinging to the windows, watching with wide eyes. The forest stood tall and dark, its shadows twisting in the sunlight. Rin walked carefully, his heart racing. Every rustle of leaves made him freeze. Every broken twig made him turn his head. The forest felt alive, as if it was watching him, testing him. He found a few berries, hanging low, red and strange. He picked one up, but a memory of his stepfather's warning stopped him. Eat the wrong thing, and the forest itself will kill you. With shaking hands, he dropped the berry. The hunger inside him screamed, but he turned back toward the house. When he returned empty-handed, the others' faces fell. Lyra tried to smile, tried to say, "At least you are safe." But her voice was thin, breaking like glass. Even hope itself was beginning to starve inside them. As night returned, the children huddled close again. The house felt colder, smaller, as if the walls were closing in. The memory of the strange knocking still haunted them. Was it their stepfather? Was it something else? None of them knew, and none of them wanted to find out, but deep inside they felt the truth. Their stepfather had abandoned them, and something far stranger had come to replace him. That night the sounds returned. Not knocking this time, but whispers carried on the wind, Voices too soft to understand, too close to be imagination. The children pressed their ears against the walls, listening with dread. The whispers came from the forest, moving around the house, circling them like predators. Taro covered his ears and cried, "Make it stop! Make it stop!" Rin held him, tight, whispering, "It's only the wind." But even he knew it was not. The forest was alive. The forest was watching. The children stayed awake until their eyes burned, waiting for the whispers to fade. At last, silence came again. But it was not the silence of safety. It was the silence of something waiting, something patient. When the dawn came again, their faces were pale, their bodies weak. The hunger was no longer just inside their stomachs. It was inside their hearts. The stepfather was gone. The forest was filled with danger, and the strange light had disappeared. They were trapped between abandonment and the unknown. Lyra whispered, "What if no one ever comes for us?" Her words cut through the silence like a knife. The children looked at one another, too tired to answer, but deep inside a question burned in all of them. If the stepfather had left them, and no one else cared, then who had knocked on their door that night? And more important, would it return? The third night came, and the children were weaker than ever. Their small bodies trembled with hunger, their eyes heavy from fear and exhaustion. The house was silent, but their minds were not. Each one thought about the strange knocking, the whispers outside, and the lights that had appeared in the sky. They had no food, no stepfather, and no hope. It felt as if the universe itself had forgotten them. Rin sat by the window again, his face pale, his lips dry. He stared into the forest, hoping to see nothing, yet fearing that he would. The trees moved with the wind, shadows twisting into shapes that looked almost alive. Every sound made him tense, every flicker of light made him doubt his eyes. He whispered to himself, "We will survive, I will not let them die." But his own stomach roared in anger, as if to mock his promise. Then, just as the moon climbed, higher it returned. The low hum, soft but steady, filled the air once more. The children sat up quickly, eyes wide, their hunger forgotten in a rush of fear. Lyra clutched Taro's hand, whispering, "It's back, it's back." Outside, a glow cut through the trees, brighter than before. The light grew larger, closer, until it swallowed the darkness around the house. Rin's breath caught in his throat. His instinct told him to hide, but something else, and something deeper, told him to watch. The children pressed against the window, peering through cracks in the wood. A strange machine hovered just above the ground, silver and black, glowing with energy. It made no sound of wheels, no sound of beasts, only that steady hum. The door of the machine opened, and a figure stepped out. The figure was tall, broad-shouldered, and wrapped in strange armor. The children gasped softly, pulling back in fear. It was not their stepfather, not anyone they had ever seen before. The figure moved slowly, carefully, as if aware that it was being watched. The glow of the machine lit its face, and for the first time the children saw it clearly. It was not alien. It was human. The children had heard stories about humans. Whispers passed through old tales, spoken in fear and awe. Humans were strange, unpredictable. Some said they were weak, others said they were monsters. But none of the children had ever seen one with their own eyes. Now one stood only a few steps away, alive, breathing, real. The human carried something in his hands, a pack, heavy and filled with objects the children could not see. He stopped near the door, looking at the old house with sharp eyes. Then he spoke, his voice calm but strong. "I know you are in there," he said, each word clear. "I mean no harm." The children froze, shocked that he spoke their language. Rin tightened his grip on the door, unsure if it was safer to open or to keep it locked. The human crouched down, placing the pack gently on the ground from it. He pulled something that made the children's mouths water instantly. Food wrapped in strange packages glowing faintly in the moonlight. He placed it on the doorstep and stepped back, raising his hands to show he carried no weapon. "You are hungry," he said softly. Take it. It is yours. The scent drifted through the cracks in the wall, warm and rich, sharper than anything they had ever smelled. Taro whimpered, his small hands reaching toward the door. Lyra held him back, whispering, "It could be a trick. What if it's poison?" But Rin's stomach twisted painfully, his eyes fixed on the food. The human's voice came again, calm and steady. "You cannot survive without eating. I will not hurt you." Then he said something that froze them even more. "You will need your strength for what is coming." The words sank into their minds like stones into water. What did he mean? What was coming? Rin's heart pounded, fear and hunger battling inside him. Finally he stood, his legs shaking, and slowly reached for the lock. The others gasped, whispering for him to stop. But he ignored them. Something about the human's voice felt different from the stepfather's. Not cruel, not angry, but steady. The door creaked open just a crack. The cold night air rushed inside, carrying with it the smell of real food. The human did not move, did not speak, only watched silently. Rin's trembling hand reached through the gap and snatched the package, pulling it back quickly. He shut the door, locking it again. The children surrounded him as he unwrapped it. Inside was bread, soft and warm, and dried fruit sweeter than anything they had tasted before. The children ate quickly, their fear fading with each bite, replaced by relief. Taro laughed for the first time in days, crumbs sticking to his face. But even as they ate, Rin's eyes kept going back to the door. The human was still out there, waiting, silent, patient, and his words echoed in Rin's mind. "You will need your strength for what is coming." When the food was gone, silence filled the room. The hunger was less now, but a new feeling had taken its place. Curiosity. Who was this human? Why was he here? And what danger was he warning them about? The children sat together, their fear slowly turning into wonder. Outside, the human remained, watching the forest with sharp, unblinking eyes, as if he knew something the children did not. The children did not sleep that night, even though their stomachs were no longer empty. Their minds were restless. They kept glancing at the door, wondering if the human was still outside. Sometimes they thought they heard footsteps, sometimes just the wind. But when dawn finally came, they saw him still there, sitting by the edge of the forest. He had not left them. Rin watched him through the window, his eyes filled with suspicion. "Why is he still here?" Lyra whispered. "He already gave us food. Why doesn't he go away?" No one had an answer. The human did not knock, did not force the door, he only waited. It was strange because their stepfather had always shouted, demanded, and punished. This human was different, calm, patient, as if he had all the time in the world. When the sun climbed higher, the human finally stood. He spoke again, his voice carrying through the walls. "You cannot stay hidden forever," he said. "The world is larger than this house and danger is coming." The words sent a shiver through the children. Rin pressed, his lips together, torn between fear and curiosity. In the end, he did something no one expected. He opened the door. The human turned his head slowly, his face serious but not cruel. His eyes softened when he saw the thin, frightened children. He reached into his pack again and pulled out more food, placing it gently on the ground. Then he stepped back, raising his hands, showing he carried no weapon. "You need to eat, but you also need to learn," he said. The children looked at Rin, waiting for his choice. Cautiously, Rin stepped outside, the others peeking through the door. The human nodded slightly, as if showing respect. He handed Rin a piece of bread, and then crouched to meet his eyes. "You are the oldest, aren't you?" he asked. Rin hesitated, then nodded. "Then you must protect them." "But you cannot do it alone," the human said. Those words struck something inside Rin. For so long he had carried the weight of his siblings' fear and hunger. Now, for the first time, someone spoke to him not as a child, but as a leader. The human stood and motioned toward the forest. "Danger is always there, hiding in the shadows," he said. "But danger fears those who are prepared." That day was the beginning of something new. The human stayed near the house, teaching the children things they had never known. He showed them how to make traps for small animals, how to tell which berries were safe, and how to build a fire without waiting for the stepfather's permission. Even Lyra, who had always been playful and afraid, learned how to sharpen a stick into a spear. The children listened to him not because he shouted but because he guided. Every lesson felt like a gift, something powerful they had been denied before. At night, when the forest grew loud, the human stood guard. He held a strange tool that glowed with energy, ready to strike if danger came too close. The children huddled inside, but for the first time, they did not tremble with fear. They felt safe, not because the world had changed, but because someone strong was standing between them and the darkness. Even little Taro began to smile again. He whispered to Lyra, "He's not like the other one. He doesn't shout, he doesn't leave." But not everything was calm. Some nights, strange noises echoed from deep in the forest, heavy footsteps that shook the ground. The human's eyes would narrow, his grip on the glowing tool tightening. He never told the children what those sounds were, only said, "Stay close to me, never wander alone." It was clear that he knew something they did not. Something about the forest, something about why he had come. One evening, as the fire crackled softly, Rin asked him, "Why are you here? Why help us?" The human looked at the flames for a long time before answering. "Because no child should be left alone," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "I lost my own once, and I will not let it happen again." The children did not fully understand his words, but they felt the weight of his sorrow. For the first time they saw not just strength in him, but pain. Day by day, the bond between them grew. The children began to trust him, to follow his lessons, to see him not as a stranger but as something more. He cooked for them, hunted with them, and even told them stories. Stories of stars, of battles, of humans who had crossed the galaxy. His voice was steady, his eyes alive with fire when he spoke of courage. The children listened with wide eyes, imagining a world bigger than their hunger and fear, and slowly they began to dream again. But the forest was not silent for long. One night, while the children slept, Rin woke to the sound of growls outside. The human was already at the door, weapon in hand, his face lit by the fire's glow. Rin ran to his side, fear rushing back into him. "What is it?" he whispered. The human's voice was calm but sharp. "The shadows are moving closer. They know you are not alone anymore." The growls turned into roars, echoing through the night. The children stirred, frightened, as the walls of the house shook. The human stepped outside, his weapon glowing brighter. "Stay inside," he ordered. "No matter what you hear, do not open the door." The children clung to each other, fear burning in their eyes, and outside the night exploded with sound. The human fought unseen enemies in the dark, his voice silent, his strikes sharp. The forest screamed with the sound of beasts, metal, and fire. The children covered their ears, trembling, waiting. At last, the noises faded, leaving only silence and the smell of smoke. The door opened slowly and the human stepped inside, his armor scratched but his eyes steady. "You are safe," he said, and then, with a faint smile, "As long as I am here." The children had begun to believe that their lives were finally safe. Days with the human were filled with learning, food, and strength. They had grown braver, their bodies stronger, their hearts steadier. For the first time they could laugh without fear, sleep without nightmares, and wake with hope. But peace never lasts forever. Darkness always finds a way back. It began with a sound, faint and sharp, like metal striking stone. The human froze when he heard it, his eyes narrowing. He motioned for the children to stay silent, his hand gripping his weapon. The noise grew louder, steady footsteps on the forest path. Not the shuffle of beasts, not the whisper of shadows. These were the footsteps of someone who walked with purpose. The children gathered close to the human, fear creeping back into their hearts. Then a voice rang out, harsh and familiar. "You thought you could hide from me?" The children's blood ran cold. It was their stepfather, his voice twisted with anger. He had returned, but he was not the same. When he stepped into the clearing, the children gasped. His face was harder, his eyes darker, filled with something cruel. Behind him were others, strangers carrying weapons, their bodies wrapped in armor that shone with red lights. The stepfather pointed at the house, his voice sharp. "Those children are mine. They belong to me." The words stung like knives. The human stepped forward, placing himself between the stepfather and the children. "They are not yours," he said calmly, his voice steady but dangerous. "They are children, not property." The stepfather sneered, his laugh cruel. "And what are you? A human? A weak, soft creature playing hero?" His men laughed with him, but the human did not move. Rin clutched Lyra's hand, whispering, "Don't be afraid, he won't leave us." But inside, his heart pounded. The stepfather's eyes, locked on him, filled with hate. "You eat too much, you take too much, you were always a burden," he spat. "I left you to die, and now you think you found a savior?" He raised his weapon and shouted, "He cannot protect you from me." The human's voice cut through the air like steel. "You abandoned them, you hurt them, you do not deserve to speak their names." The stepfather's smile faded, replaced by rage. He motioned to his men. "Take them, kill the human if you must, but bring me the children." The strangers stepped forward, their weapons glowing with red energy. The forest seemed to hold its breath. The children cried out, clinging to one another, but the human raised his hand, motioning for silence. "Stay inside. Do not move," he ordered, his voice steady. The children obeyed, though their tears burned. They watched through cracks in the wall as the two sides faced each other, the human alone against the stepfather and his soldiers. The stepfather's men moved first, stepping closer, weapons humming. The human did not retreat. He stood tall, his weapon glowing with bright light. The children could see the tension in his shoulders, the fire in his eyes. This was not just a fight for survival. This was something deeper. It was a battle for who the children truly belonged to. And in that moment, the children understood. They were no longer the stepfathers. The stepfather raised his weapon and shouted, "Humans are nothing, flesh and weakness. You cannot stand against me." But the human's reply was simple. "You will learn what it means when a human fights for family." His voice shook the air with power, and even the children felt a spark of courage in their hearts. The forest grew louder, with the sound of tension, weapons humming, branches shaking as birds fled into the sky. The children pressed closer to the walls, holding their breath. They knew what was coming. The first strike would be made, and the quiet days of safety would be gone. Their stepfather had returned not to love but to claim, not to protect but to destroy, and only the human stood in his way. The stepfather's eyes burned with fury as he shouted, "Take them now." His men rushed forward, weapons raised. The human stepped forward too, his body a shield, his eyes unbroken, the night filled with the promise of violence. The children held each other close, trembling but not hopeless, because even though danger was here, even though their enemy had returned, they knew one thing with certainty. The human would not leave them. He would fight, no matter the cost. And for the first time, their fear carried something new within it, a spark of faith, a belief that humans were not like others. The stepfather's voice rang out again, cruel and cold. "You will regret standing against me, human." The human lifted his weapon, the glow brighter than the stars above. "I regret nothing," he answered, his voice like thunder. The air shook with the first clash of power, and the battle for the children's future began. The night exploded with chaos. The stepfather's men rushed forward, their weapons glowing red, cutting through the darkness like fire. The human moved too, his weapon bursting with white light that shone brighter than the moon. The children pressed against the cracks in the wall, their small eyes wide with terror and hope. This was not a fight they had ever imagined. It was war at their very doorstep. The first soldier swung his blade of energy, fast and sharp, but the human blocked it with a crack of light, sparks flying into the air. The clash shook the ground, the sound ringing like thunder. The human countered, his strike swift and precise, dropping the soldier to the forest floor. The children gasped, realizing the human fought with more skill than they had ever seen. This was not luck. This was mastery. The stepfather sneered from behind his men. "Kill him! He is only one man," he shouted. But his voice carried frustration because deep inside he saw something his pride would not admit. The human was not ordinary. He fought with a power beyond flesh and bone. He fought with purpose, with fire. Burning in his heart, 2 more soldiers rushed forward, their weapons slicing through the air. The human ducked, rolled, and struck back with speed too fast for the children to follow. The forest lit up with bursts of red and white, every strike echoing like lightning. Branches fell, leaves scattered, the ground shook beneath their feet. But through the chaos, the human never stepped back. He stood his ground, holding the line between the children and death. Inside the house, Taro cried softly, "He will lose, there are too many." But Lyra shook her head, clutching his hand tightly. "No, look at him, he doesn't stop," she whispered. And she was right. The human fought as if his body was unbreakable, as if pain itself could not touch him. Every strike was filled with something greater than strength. It was filled with love. The stepfather grew angry, his eyes burning with rage. He stepped forward himself, his weapon larger. Darker, fueled by hatred, he roared, swinging at the human with a blow that cracked the air. The human met him head-on, their weapons colliding with a blast that lit the forest like day. The children covered their ears from the sound, their hearts pounding. It was father against betrayer, protector against abandoner. The stepfather snarled, his words venomous. "You think they will love you? You think they will choose you?" The human gritted his teeth, pushing back with all his strength. "They already have," he answered. The stepfather roared in fury, striking again and again, but the human held, never breaking, never bowing. The soldiers tried to surround him, but the children screamed, "Behind you!" The human spun, his weapon flashing in a deadly arc. 2 soldiers fell, the rest stumbled back, fear flickering in their eyes. They had never seen a human fight like this. They had never seen anyone fight like this. Still, the stepfather pressed on, his strikes wild but powerful. The human's arms shook under the weight, his breaths deep and sharp, but in his eyes there was no fear, only determination. "You left them to die," he growled, his voice cutting through the clash. "You don't deserve them." The stepfather bared his teeth, spitting, "They are mine." The battle raged on, tearing the clearing apart. Trees split, the ground burned with scorched marks. The children huddled together, praying, whispering, clinging to every sound of the fight. Their stepfather was strong, cruel, and filled with hate, but the human was something more. He was fighting not for himself, but for them. Finally, the stepfather struck with all his strength, his weapon crashing down. The human caught the blow, his knees bending, the ground cracking beneath him. The children cried out, certain he would fall, but the human roared, a sound that shook the night. With one final push, he threw the stepfather back, sending him crashing into the dirt. Silence fell for a heartbeat. The stepfather lay on the ground, his face twisted with disbelief. The human stood above him, his weapon glowing bright, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. The soldiers hesitated, fear written across their faces. One by one, they stepped back, no longer eager to fight. They had seen enough. They had seen the strength of a human. The stepfather's voice cracked, filled with hate but also fear. "This is not the end," he spat. He staggered to his feet, retreating into the shadows with the few soldiers who still followed. His words echoed as he disappeared into the forest. "You cannot keep them, they will never be yours." Darkness swallowed him, leaving only silence. The children rushed out of the house, tears in their eyes. They surrounded the human, clinging to him, their voices trembling. "You won," Lyra whispered. "You saved us." The human dropped his weapon, his tired eyes softening. "I did not win," he said quietly. "I only protected what was already mine." He pulled them close, his arms strong and warm. The battle was over, but the war was not. The stepfather would return, the children knew it, but they also knew something far more powerful. They were no longer alone. They had someone who would never abandon them, never see them as a burden. They had a father. The forest was quiet after the battle. The night air smelled of smoke and fear, but also of survival. The children stood around the human, their small, bodies trembling, not from hunger now but from the storm that had just passed. Their stepfather was gone, his soldiers scattered, yet his shadow still lingered in their hearts. But when they looked up at the human, that shadow began to fade, because in his eyes they saw something the stepfather had never given them. Love. Rin was the first to speak, his voice small but steady. "You didn't leave us," he whispered, almost as if he couldn't believe it. The human bent down, placing a hand on Rin's shoulder. "I never will," he said, his voice strong. Those words struck deeper than any weapon. For the first time in their lives, the children felt safe, truly safe. The days that followed were different from anything they had known. The human repaired the broken house, strengthened its walls, and built a fire that never went out. He hunted for them, cooked for them, and taught them more each day. The children grew healthier, their thin faces filling with life, their laughter returning little by little. Taro no longer cried at night. Lyra no longer hid her fear with forced laughter. Rin watched the human closely. He saw the way he carried himself, not just with strength but with patience. The stepfather had always demanded respect, punishing them when they failed. But the human earned respect by showing kindness, by standing with them, not above them. The difference was clear as the sky. Humans were different. At night, the human told them stories. He spoke of stars beyond their world, of places where humans had walked among strange skies. He spoke of wars and peace, of losses and victories, of fathers and mothers who protected their young no matter the cost. The children listened with wide eyes, their hunger now replaced by wonder. Through his words, they began to dream. Dream of a future bigger than the small house, bigger than fear, but danger had not disappeared completely. Sometimes the forest still whispered, shadows still moved, and the memory of the stepfather still burned. The human never ignored it, never pretended it was gone. Instead, he prepared them. He taught them to use their hands to build, to defend, to think. "You are not weak," he told them. "You are stronger than you know. But strength is not only in the body, it is in the heart." Those words became their shield. Whenever fear tried to return, they remembered them. One evening, as the stars lit the sky, Lyra asked, "Why do you help us? We are not your children." The human's eyes softened, filled with a sadness the children could not fully understand. "I lost my own once," he said quietly, "and I swore never again would I let children suffer while I could stand." The silence that followed was not heavy but warm. From that day, the children no longer saw him as only a protector. He was more than that. He was the father they had always needed. The father who would never walk away. Rin began to call him father in whispers, testing the word like a fragile glass. The others followed, and soon the word was no longer fragile. It was real, solid, alive. The human never corrected them, never told them to stop. He only smiled, a smile filled with both sorrow and joy. He carried their trust as if it was the most sacred weapon he had ever held, and in return, they carried his strength within their hearts. They were no longer abandoned. Children, they were a family. When the stepfather's shadow returned in their dreams, they no longer feared it because they knew they were not alone anymore. The human had shown them that love could be stronger than blood, stronger than cruelty, stronger than hate. He had shown them that being human was not weakness. It was something powerful, something unshakable, something different. One night, as the fire crackled and the forest was silent, Rin looked at him and asked, "What makes humans so strong?" The human thought for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the stars above. "It's not our weapons," he said. "It's not our size. It's not even our minds." He looked back at the children, his voice steady. "It is our heart. It is the love we carry. It is the promise that we will fight not for power but for those we call family." The children fell silent, his words sinking deep into their hearts. They finally understood why he was different, why he had stayed when their stepfather had left. Humans were not stronger in flesh, they were stronger in spirit. And that spirit had saved them. From that moment, they no longer doubted. They no longer feared being abandoned again. As the night stretched on, the fire glowing bright, The children leaned against him, their new father. He wrapped his arms around them, his eyes watching the shadows of the forest, always ready, always alert. But in his heart, for the first time in a long time, there was peace, because he was no longer alone either. The stars above shone quietly, witnesses to a truth as old as time. Humans were different.